The National Liberal Party, known until 1948 as the Liberal National Party, was a liberal political party in the United Kingdom from 1931 to 1968. It broke away from the Liberal Party, and later merged with the Conservative Party. History. The Liberal Nationals evolved as a distinctive group within the Liberal Party when the main body of Liberals were maintaining in office the second Labour government of Ramsay MacDonald, who lacked a majority in Parliament. A growing number of Liberal MPs led by Sir John Simon declared their total opposition to this policy and began to cooperate more closely with the Conservative Party, even advocating a policy of replacing free trade with tariffs, an anathema to many traditional Liberals. By June 1931, three Liberal MPs, Simon, Ernest Brown and Robert Hutchison, resigned the party's whip and sat as independents. When the Labour government was replaced by a makeshift, emergency national government in August 1931, dissident Liberals were temporarily reconciled with the rest of the party within it. But in the next 2 months the party's acting leader, Herbert Samuel, came close to resigning from the government over the national government's proposal to call a snap general election, fearing that it would lead to a majority for the Conservatives and the abolition of free trade. However, he was undermined by the willingness of those Liberals such as Simon, who in extremis would support protectionism, to continue to support the national government and even to take the vacant offices to ensure it retained a broad party base. Samuel was welcomed back into the new national government subject to an agreed concession to fight the general election on a separate Liberal Party manifesto, but staunch supporters of the national government were prepared to repudiate free trade. Witnessing the rise of cheap foreign goods, the party split over how they would negotiate over ardent conservative protectionism. Supporters formed the Liberal National Party in the run-up to the 1931 general election in October. A third group under the official leader, David Lloyd George, also emerged, the Independent Liberals, who opposed the national government completely. But this had few adherents amongst prominent Liberals beyond Lloyd George's relatives. For the next election in 1935 they reunited with the mainstream Liberals, colloquially dubbed Samuelites. Following the election, Liberals following John Simon formally repudiated the official Liberal Party in Parliament and operated to all extents and purposes as a separate party group, though they were not immediately fully recognized as such. In 1932 the Samuelite Liberals resigned from the government over the result of the Ottawa Conference, the introduction of a series of tariff agreements, though they continued to support the national government from the backbenches. By 1933 they had abandoned it completely and crossed the floor of the House of Commons, leaving the Liberal Nationals supporting the government. The two groups were now completely separate, though some Liberal MPs like Robert Bernays remained on the government benches before officially joining the Liberal Nationals, and other MPs maintained links across the floor. Within the wider party the split was not so clear. Liberal associations which supported Liberal national candidates remained affiliated to the National Liberal Federation, the mainstream body for the official party, until that body was dissolved in 1936. In particular, one Liberal National Cabinet Minister, Walter Runciman, elected in 1899, of a wealthy shipping family, remained its president even after the Commons split. Its replacement, the Liberal National Council, the main organ of the local party, was founded in 1936. However, there were increasing divisions when some Liberal associations endorsed Liberal Nationals, especially at by-elections. Frequently independent Liberals came forward to oppose such a candidate endorsed by the local association that called itself Liberal, but was actually Liberal National. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s there were a number of proposals to reunite the two Liberal parties, but these routinely found founded on the question of continued support for the national government. During World War II, the Liberal Nationals suffered a stream of defectors who joined either the independent Liberals or the Conservatives, or else became non-party supporters of the government. In 1940, the national government was replaced by an all-party coalition led by Winston Churchill. The Liberal Nationals were marginalised, with Simon kicked upstairs to become Lord Chancellor. The party's new leader, Ernest Brown, was only occasionally accorded the status of a party leader within the coalition and otherwise faced questions over the future of the party. Proposals emerged again for the party to reunite with the independent Liberals, but these founded on Brown's insistence on supporting a revival of the national government once the coalition broke up, which the independent Liberals rejected. After both parties' drubbing and the Labour Party's victory in the 1945 general election, the two factions made renewed attempts at reuniting. At Westminster, the core independent Liberals were in a shattered state, their tiny numbers representing all shades of opinion, and it was doubtful that the new leader, Clement Davis, could carry all of his colleagues into a united party. Only in London were the two reunited at regional organisational level, although in some individual boroughs and constituencies such as Huddersfield, rival Liberal associations began cooperating and eventually merging as avowed Liberal associations. At the same time, there were calls from devout Liberal Nationals, who had cooperated closely with the Conservatives and received numerous ministerial posts in the four national governments, for that entire wing to fully unify with the Conservatives, with whom they had rarely expressed any overt divergence of opinion. Few political commentators discerned a difference between the two. Merger with the Conservative Party. In May 1947, the Woolton-Teviot agreement between Lord Woolton and Lord Teviot resulted in the two parties merging at the constituency level. The Liberal Nationals also changed the name to National Liberals at this stage. The National Liberals therefore fought the next 5 British general elections as allies of the Conservative Party. To confuse matters, their candidates stood for election with a variety of names, including National Liberal and Conservative, Liberal and Conservative, and so on. Even established Conservatives with little or no former connection to the original party after 1950 used the National Liberal name when going forward as candidates in some wards and constituencies. Immediate consequences for the Liberal Party. Even more than before 1947, the appearance of National Liberal candidates aggrieved the Liberal Party. They saw this as a blatant misappropriation by the Conservative Party of not only much of the funds but also their historic party name, while the Liberals themselves were in a powerless political position. In 1951, it was only thanks to fraught local arrangements that 5 of the 6 remaining Liberal MPs were elected in the absence of a Conservative candidate. 2 of these elections were achieved by formal local pacts, whereby only one Liberal or Conservative candidate would stand in each constituency in Bolton and Huddersfield. Increasingly, with electoral deposits expensive and electoral support low, the Liberal Party fielded few candidates, especially in 1951 and 1955 when the party barely mustered over 100 to stand for Parliament. Consequences for the National Liberal Party. While the Liberal Party struggled to survive, National Liberals won 17 seats in the 1950 general election. In subsequent elections the numbers increased to 19, 21 and 19, continuing the new status as the larger of the two Liberal groupings in Parliament. During this period, 2 National Liberals held cabinet rank plus one who sat as a Liberal. John Scott Macleay, 1st Viscount Muirshiel, was Secretary of State for Scotland from 1957 to 1962 until sacked by Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. Charles Hill, best known for his work in the 1940s as the Radio Doctor for his nutritional advice on the BBC Home Service, stood as an independent in the 1945 general election, but then won the Luton parliamentary seat as a Conservative and National Liberal in 1950. He was appointed Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministry of Food in 1951. From 1957 to 1961 he was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and from 1961 he was Minister of Housing and Local Government and Welsh Affairs. He lost his place in the cabinet in Harold Macmillan's reshuffle in 1962. William Lloyd George, MP for Pembrokeshire 1922 to 1951, had moved away from the Liberal Party by 1946. He sat as a Liberal, but joined Winston Churchill on the opposition frontbench. Unusually, he never formally joined the National Liberals, and while not sitting on the government benches in 1931, had been independent of the Liberal Party whip since that year and ultimately accepted a junior post in the Neville Chamberlain National Government administration in 1939. He served as Home Secretary from 1954 to 1957. Leaders: 1931 to 1940, Sir John Simon. 1940 to 1945, Ernest Brown. 1945–1946, James Henderson Stewart. 1946–1947, Stanley Holmes. 1947–1956, John Macleay. 1956–1959, James Duncan. 1959–1961, James Henderson Stewart. 1961–1964, Colin Thornton Kemsley. 1964–1968, David Renton. Electoral performance. Legacy. In October 2013, Conservative MP Nicholas Bowles suggested in a speech that the National Liberal Party be revived as an affiliate of the Conservative Party. Bibliography. The History of the Liberal Party 1895–1970 by Roy Douglas. A Short History of the Liberal Party 1900–92 by Chris Cook. Liberals in Schism. A History of the National Liberal Party by David Dutton.